He stood before his colleagues, a champagne flute raised high, his arm wrapped tightly around a woman who was not his wife. To the future, he toasted, his voice dripping with arrogance, and to leaving behind the dead weight that holds us back. Across the room, his 6 months pregnant wife, Rosalind, felt the world shatter. The cruel laughter of the crowd was a physical blow, but the smirk on her husband's face was the ultimate betrayal. He thought she was just a quiet, simple woman he'd outgrown. What he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the dead weight he just publicly destroyed owned every brick, every patent, and every single paycheck at Beaumont Innovations. His future was in her hands, and she was about to close her fist. The city lights of Boston glittered like a carpet of fallen stars from the penthouse apartment Declan Finch and Rosalind Beaumont called home. To any outsider, it was the pinnacle of success. A sleek, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows, furnished with a tasteful precision that spoke of money, but a quiet, old kind of money. It was Rosalind's money, a fact she had kept carefully guarded for the 5 years of their marriage. Their story had begun as a fairy tale. He was the brilliant, ambitious MBA graduate from Wharton, clawing his way up the corporate ladder at a burgeoning tech firm, Beaumont Innovations. She was the seemingly unassuming art historian he'd met at a fundraiser, gentle, intelligent, and possessing a serene beauty that seemed to calm his frenetic energy. He loved her quiet support, her lack of demands, the way she seemed utterly unimpressed by the corporate world he was so desperate to conquer. He didn't know her lack of impression was born of familiarity, not naivety. Rosalind was the only child of the late William Beaumont, the visionary founder of the company. Before he passed, he had made her promise one thing: find a partner who loved Rosalind the woman, not Rosalind the heiress. He had seen too many of his peers' children trapped in gilded cages, their partners little more than gold-digging sycophants. So, upon his death, the estate was placed in a complex, blind trust, with Rosalind as the sole, anonymous beneficiary and majority shareholder. The company was run by a loyal board and CEO, Mr. Arthur Pembroke, a man who had been her father's right hand and her own sworn secret keeper. For years the arrangement worked. Rosalind watched Declan from a distance, proud of his genuine talent and drive. She saw him earn his promotions, celebrate his victories, and she believed, truly believed, he loved her for herself. When she told him she was pregnant with their first child, his joy seemed real, his kisses genuine. But lately, a subtle chill had entered their home. The chill had a name: Bianca Slater. Bianca was everything Rosalind was not. She was sharp, loud, and dressed in clothes that screamed their price tags. A recent hire in Declan's marketing department, she was brazenly ambitious and made no secret of her admiration for him. Declan dismissed Rosalind's concerns as pregnancy hormones. "Ros, darling, she's a kid, just eager to learn," he'd say, patting her hand dismissively. "You're being overly sensitive. I need people like her on my team if I'm going to land the VP of Global Strategy position." That vice president position had become Declan's obsession. It was the key to the executive floor, the kingdom he felt he deserved. He worked later, his texts became shorter, and the scent of a strange, cloying perfume, Bianca's signature scent, clung to his suits. The night of the annual Beaumont Innovations Gala was supposed to be a celebration. It marked the company's 25th anniversary, and a major announcement about future leadership was expected. Rosalind, despite the growing unease in her heart and the discomfort of her 3rd trimester, had bought a stunning, deep sapphire gown to complement Declan's custom-tailored suit. "You look beautiful, Ros," he said, but his eyes were distant, already at the event. He barely touched her, his mind clearly elsewhere. The gala was held at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, a sprawling, opulent affair. The air buzzed with champagne-fueled conversation and corporate ambition. Rosalind felt a pang of nostalgia. Her father had loved this museum. She exchanged a brief, knowing glance with Arthur Pembroke from across the room. He gave her a subtle, concerned nod. He had seen the change in Declan too, and had tried to warn her in his own gentle way. Declan was in his element, moving through the crowd with a predatory grace, shaking hands, laughing too loudly. Rosalind stood by his side, a quiet accessory, her hand resting on her swollen belly. She watched as Bianca Slater poured into a garish, sequined red dress, attached herself to their group. "Declan, darling, you are on fire tonight," Bianca gushed, touching his arm in a way that was far too familiar. "Everyone is talking about you for the VP role. It's a done deal." Declan preened, his chest puffing out. "We'll see. It's about vision. Some people just don't have it." He glanced at Rosalind, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. The evening wore on, a slow-motion nightmare for Rosalind. She saw the whispers, the pointed looks from colleagues, as Declan and Bianca grew bolder, their heads closer together, their laughter intertwined. He refilled Bianca's champagne flute 3 times, yet never once asked if his pregnant wife needed a glass of water. The breaking point came when Jeremy Croft, the current VP of Global Strategy, who was being promoted to COO, took the stage. After a long speech, he came to the moment everyone was waiting for. "It is my distinct pleasure," Croft announced, "to endorse the man I believe will take this company to new heights, a man of unparalleled drive and vision. The board will make its final decision next week, but my vote goes to Mr. Declan Finch." The room erupted in applause. Declan, beaming, took Bianca by the hand and practically dragged her towards the stage, leaving Rosalind standing alone. He grabbed a flute of champagne from a passing tray and stepped onto the small podium. He looked out at the sea of faces, his eyes scanning over them until they landed, with cold precision, on his wife. The room quieted, expecting a heartfelt thank you, perhaps a loving tribute to the supportive woman carrying his child. What they got was an execution. "Thank you, Jeremy," Declan began, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm honored. A role like this requires sacrifice. It requires you to be lean, agile, and forward-thinking." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "It means you have to surround yourself with people who share that drive." He then tightened his arm around Bianca's waist, pulling her flush against him. "People like Bianca, who understand what it takes to win." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Then Declan raised his glass and looked directly at Rosalind again. The charming smile on his face curdled into a cruel smirk. And most importantly, he projected, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall, "It means knowing when to leave behind the dead weight that holds you back, the distractions, the baggage." The insult was unmistakable, a poisoned arrow aimed directly at her heart, at their unborn child. Gasps rippled through the audience. Bianca giggled, a high, piercing sound that grated on Rosalind's raw nerves. Some people laughed awkwardly, unsure how to react. A few senior managers, loyal to her father's memory, looked on in horror. Rosalind stood frozen, the blood draining from her face. The room seemed to tilt, the glittering lights blurring into painful shards. His words, dead weight, baggage, echoed in her skull. This wasn't just an affair. This was a public declaration of contempt. He was discarding her, a piece of unwanted luggage, in front of the entire world he was so desperate to impress. The world her father had built. Her legs felt weak, but a new, unfamiliar sensation was coiling in her gut, hot and sharp, burning away the shock and the pain. It was fury, pure, unadulterated rage. She turned, her back straight, and walked out of the museum. She didn't run. She didn't cry. Every step was deliberate, a silent vow. He thought he was toasting his future. He had no idea he had just signed its death warrant. The taxi ride back to the penthouse was a blur of neon streaks against the dark glass. Rosalind didn't shed a single tear. The searing humiliation at the gala had acted as a cauterizing agent, sealing the wound of her heartbreak and leaving behind a hard, polished scar of resolve. The quiet, accommodating wife Declan Finch had taken for granted ceased to exist somewhere between the Rodin sculptures and the museum's exit. She entered the cold, silent apartment. It was no longer a home. It was a stage set for a life that was now a lie. His scent, his belongings, his presence lingered like a ghost she was determined to exorcise. Methodically, she walked into their shared walk-in closet. She pulled out 2 large suitcases and began to pack Declan's things. His expensive suits, his polished shoes, his collection of ridiculously overpriced watches. She worked with a chilling efficiency, a general preparing for a war. Each folded shirt was a strategic maneuver, each packed box a piece of enemy artillery being neutralized. By the time she heard his key in the lock 2 hours later, 6 suitcases and 3 boxes were lined up in the foyer like soldiers at attention. Declan stumbled in, reeking of champagne and Bianca's perfume. He was flushed with victory, his eyes bright with arrogance. He saw the suitcases and froze, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before it hardened into annoyance. "What the hell is this, Ros?" He slurred slightly. "Spring cleaning at 1 in the morning?" Rosalind emerged from the shadows of the living room. She was no longer wearing the elegant sapphire gown. She had changed into a simple black dress. Her hair was pulled back severely, and her face was a mask of cold composure. "Your things are packed," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "I want you out of my apartment. Tonight." He laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "Your apartment? Don't be ridiculous. We bought this place together. And you're not kicking me out. You're pregnant and hysterical. We'll talk about this in the morning when you've calmed down." He tried to step around the suitcases, to dismiss her as he always did. She moved to block his path. "No, Declan, I bought this apartment with my money," she stated, the words like chips of ice. "Just like I bought the car you drive and the watch on your wrist. You have been living in my world, on my terms, and your tenancy is now terminated." He stared at her, genuinely baffled. "Your money? What money? The little inheritance your father left you?" "Don't be so dramatic, Ros. It paid for a few nice dinners. Let's not pretend you're some kind of tycoon." It was the final, ignorant insult she needed, the utter blindness of his greed. "Get out," she repeated, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous command, "or I will call security and have you removed for trespassing." Something in her eyes, a glint of steel he'd never seen before, finally broke through his drunken haze. He saw that she was not hysterical. She was serious, deadly serious. "Fine," he spat, his face twisting in a sneer. "Fine, keep your damn apartment. You think I need this? You think I need you? I've got the VP position in the bag. I'll be making more in a year than your little inheritance is worth. I'll send for my things tomorrow." "You won't," she said calmly. "They will be held in a storage unit. My lawyer will be in contact with the details, and with divorce papers." "Lawyer?" he scoffed. "You can't afford a lawyer who can go up against mine." He grabbed his coat and briefcase, tripping over a suitcase in his haste. He shot her a look of pure venom. "You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back when you realize what you've thrown away. You and your baggage." He slammed the door behind him. The sound echoed in the vast emptiness of the apartment. For a moment, Rosalind allowed herself to lean against the wall, her hand protectively covering her child. A single, hot tear finally escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Not a tear of sadness, but of release. The final purge of the man she once loved. She took a deep, steadying breath, pulled out her phone, and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. "Arthur," she said, her voice steady. "It's time." There was a pause on the other end, then the grave, familiar voice of Arthur Pembroke. "I saw what happened, Rosalind. I am so sorry. Are you all right?" "I'm better than all right, Arthur. I'm awake," she replied. "He just left. I need you to do a few things for me. First, arrange for a security detail at my building, effective immediately. He is not to be allowed access under any circumstances. Second, I need you to schedule an emergency, confidential board meeting for next Friday at 10 a.m. Put only one item on the agenda, a review and final decision on the VP of Global Strategy appointment. Of course," Arthur said, a hint of admiration in his tone. "Is there anything else?" "Yes," Rosalind said, a cold smile touching her lips for the first time that night. "I need you to contact Genevieve Dubois. Tell her I require her services. I want the most ironclad, merciless divorce attorney in the state of Massachusetts, and I want to begin proceedings at dawn." Genevieve Dubois was a legend in Boston's legal circles. A shark in a Chanel suit, she specialized in high-asset divorces and corporate litigation. She was precisely the weapon Rosalind needed. The next morning, Rosalind met Arthur in a private room at the quiet, old-world hotel where she had taken a suite. Arthur Pembroke was in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that held the wisdom of a man who had navigated the treacherous waters of the corporate world for 40 years. He looked at Rosalind, not with pity, but with a profound respect. "Your father would be so proud of your strength, my dear," he said softly. "He would be disappointed it took me this long to show it," she replied, her voice firm. "He made me promise to protect his legacy. I see now that protecting his legacy means protecting his company from men like Declan." They spent the next hour laying the groundwork. Arthur would be her proxy, her voice on the inside. He confirmed that Declan, blinded by his own ego, had no idea about Rosalind's true identity. To him and everyone else, she was just the founder's daughter who had received a modest, sentimental inheritance. The bulk of the Beaumont fortune and the controlling shares were believed to be held by a reclusive, anonymous European investment group, the perfect cover story William Beaumont had established years ago. "He's been celebrating all morning," Arthur reported grimly, "telling everyone who will listen that the job is his. He and Ms. Slater have been insufferable." "Good," Rosalind said. "Let him climb as high as he can. It will make the fall that much more spectacular. For the next week, I want you to give him everything he wants. Greenlight his project proposals. Approve his expense reports. Let him believe he is untouchable. Let him build his own gallows." "And the board meeting?" Arthur asked. "He will come into that room expecting a coronation," Rosalind explained, her eyes glinting. "He'll deliver his big presentation on his vision for the company's future, and when he's finished, you will introduce the chairwoman of the board and majority shareholder who has flown in specifically to approve the appointment." Arthur's eyebrows shot up. "You're going to be there?" "I'm not just going to be there," Rosalind corrected him, a steely determination in her voice. "I'm going to run the meeting. It's time the Queen came out of exile." The week leading up to the board meeting was a masterclass in psychological warfare, orchestrated by Rosalind from the quiet seclusion of her hotel suite. Declan, meanwhile, was living the life he had always dreamed of, completely oblivious to the web being woven around him. He had moved in with Bianca, their affair now brazenly public. They were the new power couple of Beaumont Innovations, and they made sure everyone knew it. They'd arrive at the office together in his company-leased BMW, a car Rosalind's trust had paid for, laughing and touching, a daily spectacle of disrespect. Just as Rosalind had instructed, Arthur Pembroke played his part to perfection. He treated Declan with a newfound deference, fueling his already dangerously inflated ego. "The preliminary board feedback is exceptionally positive, Declan," Arthur would say in their daily check-ins. "They're very impressed with your Project Chimera proposal." Project Chimera was Declan's magnum opus, a hugely ambitious and risky plan to acquire a smaller AI startup. It was the centerpiece of his presentation for the VP role. He saw it as his legacy-defining move. Rosalind, having reviewed the financials her father had taught her to read since she was a teenager, saw it for what it was: a reckless, ego-driven gamble that would put the company in significant debt for a technology they could develop in-house for a fraction of the cost. Declan became drunk on the power he thought he was about to possess. He was dismissive to his subordinates and openly mocked anyone who questioned his strategy. He and Bianca would take 2-hour lunches at Boston's most expensive restaurants, expensing them as client meetings. Rosalind approved every single one. Each extravagant receipt was another nail in his corporate coffin. While Declan was basking in his fool's paradise, Rosalind was assembling her war cabinet. Her meetings with Genevieve Dubois were sharp and efficient. "He'll fight the divorce," Genevieve, a woman with piercing blue eyes and an aura of absolute control, warned her. "He'll claim spousal support, a share of assets. He'll try to paint you as an unstable, hormonal, pregnant woman." "He has no idea what the assets are," Rosalind replied coolly. "As far as he's concerned, the only major asset is the penthouse, which is solely in my name, purchased from my personal account before we were married. The prenuptial agreement he signed without even reading properly is ironclad. It stipulates a clean break, with neither party having a claim on premarital assets or inheritances." Genevieve raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Your father was a very smart man." "He was a protector," Rosalind corrected. "Now it's my turn." Rosalind also worked tirelessly with Arthur and the company's CFO, a shrewd woman named Maria Flores. They dissected Declan's entire career at Beaumont Innovations. They found a disturbing pattern. Declan had a habit of taking credit for the work of junior team members, subtly sabotaging rivals and fudging numbers on quarterly reports to make his department look more successful than it was. The most damning discovery came from a young, brilliant software engineer named Kenji Tanaka. Kenji had developed a groundbreaking proprietary algorithm months ago, one that would revolutionize their logistics division. He had presented it to Declan, his direct superior. Declan had dismissed the project as unfeasible and shelved it. 3 weeks later, the core components of Kenji's algorithm appeared in Declan's Project Chimera, presented as his own innovative idea to justify the exorbitant acquisition of the AI startup. He hadn't just stolen credit. He was trying to spend over $100 million of company money to acquire a technology they already owned, created by an employee he had belittled. "This is it," Rosalind said, looking at the evidence spread across the table. "This is more than just grounds for dismissal. This is fraud." The trap was now perfectly set. The bait was the VP position. The mechanism was Declan's own arrogance. On the Thursday before the board meeting, Declan was informed by Arthur's office that his final presentation had been moved to the main executive boardroom on the 50th floor. a room reserved for the most important company decisions. The board is flying in for this, Declan, Arthur told him over the phone. They want to hear your vision firsthand, and I've just been informed that the chairwoman of the holding company's board will be in attendance. It's a formality, but she likes to personally sign off on all senior VP appointments. Declan could barely contain his glee. The chairwoman, the mythical, reclusive figurehead of the anonymous investment group. Her presence meant this was no longer a promotion. It was an anointment. "Don't worry, Arthur," Declan said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'll make sure not to disappoint her." That evening, he took Bianca out to celebrate. They went to Mamma Maria in the North End, securing the most coveted table with a view of the city square. He bought a vintage bottle of Barolo that cost more than a junior employee's monthly salary. "To us, baby," Declan toasted, clinking his glass against Bianca's. "Tomorrow I take over the 50th floor, and once I'm there, I'll make sure my most valuable asset comes with me." He winked at her. "VP Slater has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" Bianca purred, already picturing her new office. "Heard from the Ice Queen?" Bianca asked, swirling her wine. Declan snorted. "Got a letter from her lawyer today. Some nonsense about the prenup. Let her try. She's got nothing. By the time my lawyers are done with her, she'll be lucky to keep the ugly art she loves so much. She's probably sitting alone in some sad little apartment, crying her eyes out." He laughed, a smug, ugly sound. Meanwhile, miles away in her hotel suite, Rosalind was not crying. She was on a conference call with Genevieve and the entire Beaumont Innovations Board of Directors, walking them through the mountain of evidence against Declan Finch. One by one, she secured their unanimous, confidential vote for his immediate termination. She ended the call, stood up, and walked to the window. She looked out at the same glittering cityscape Declan was currently celebrating conquering. "Tomorrow, Declan," she whispered to the glass, her hand on her belly. "You wanted a forward-thinking future. Tomorrow I'm going to give it to you." Friday morning dawned bright and cold, the Boston sky a crisp, unforgiving blue. Declan Finch felt it was a sky befitting a king on his coronation day. He chose his suit with the care of a general selecting his armor, a deep charcoal brioni, a crisp white shirt, and a power tie in the Beaumont Innovations corporate blue. He looked in the mirror and saw the man he had always believed himself to be, powerful, successful, a master of the universe. Bianca fussed over him, straightening his tie, her eyes shining with a greedy, reflected glory. "Knock 'em dead, handsome. I'll be waiting with the champagne. I've already cleared a space on my desk for you to put my new nameplate." He kissed her, a perfunctory, confident gesture. "Don't get too comfortable. You'll be moving to a corner office next to mine by Monday." As he rode the private elevator up to the 50th floor, his stomach fluttered, but it was with exhilaration, not nerves. This was the culmination of everything he had worked for, schemed for, and sacrificed for. He thought of Rosalind, a fleeting, dismissive thought. He pictured her, pregnant and alone, and felt a surge of vindication. She had been a comfortable placeholder, a stepping stone. He was destined for greater things, and she was simply unable to keep up. Her memory was already fading, like a black and white photograph in a world of vibrant color. The executive boardroom was an intimidating space designed to convey power. A massive, polished mahogany table dominated the room, surrounded by 20 high-backed leather chairs. At the far end, a wall of glass offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city and the harbor beyond. The board members were already assembled, a collection of stern, powerful figures from the worlds of finance, tech, and law. They were the old guard, loyalists to William Beaumont, and Declan had always found them stuffy and old-fashioned. Today, however, he greeted them with a magnanimous charm. Arthur Pembroke sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "Declan, thank you for joining us. The board is eager to hear your presentation." Declan noticed one empty chair. It was at the opposite head of the table from Arthur, a slightly larger, more ornate chair that was usually unoccupied, the seat of power. "Is the chairwoman here yet?" Declan asked, trying to sound casual. "She's on her way," Arthur replied smoothly. "She has been briefed on your proposal and has asked that you begin. She will join us momentarily and prefers not to cause a disruption." Perfect. Declan thrived on an audience. He plugged his laptop into the integrated system, and his Project Chimera presentation flashed onto the massive screen that descended from the ceiling. For the next 45 minutes, Declan was in his element. He was a masterful salesman, and the product he was selling was himself. He spoke with passion and conviction about market disruption, synergy, and leveraging assets. He painted a picture of a future where Beaumont innovations dominated the AI sector, a future built on his vision. He presented Kenji Tanaka's stolen algorithm as the conceptual framework he had developed, the justification for the 9-figure acquisition. He was so wrapped up in his own performance that he didn't notice the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. He didn't see the hard, knowing glances exchanged between board members. He didn't register the way Arthur Pembroke's jaw tightened. He concluded with a flourish. "The future is not something we wait for," he declared, his voice ringing with theatrical confidence. "It is something we build. With Project Chimera, we are not just building a new product line. We are building the future of this entire industry. Thank you." He stood back, basking in the polite, non-committal applause. He felt a surge of triumph. He had nailed it. The job was his. "Thank you, Declan," Arthur said, his voice flat. "An ambitious presentation. Before we proceed to the board's questions, there is one final piece of business. As I mentioned, our chairwoman has joined us. She wished to observe before making her introduction." Declan's head snapped towards the main door, expecting to see some formidable, elderly European woman. Instead, the private door to the adjoining office, the founder's old office, opened silently, and Rosalind Beaumont walked in. She was not the gentle, unassuming woman he had discarded. This was a different person entirely. She wore a bespoke, dark grey maternity business dress that was both elegant and authoritative. Her hair was styled in a sleek, professional chignon. Her face was calm, her expression serene, but her eyes held a power and a cold fire he had never seen before. She moved with a quiet, deliberate grace, her pregnancy not a weakness, but a symbol of creation, of the future he had so arrogantly claimed to be building. A wave of utter disbelief washed over Declan. His brain could not process what he was seeing. What was she doing here? Had she lost her mind? Had she come to beg for him, back in the most insane way imaginable? The board members, however, all stood up in a unified show of respect. Rosalind walked to the empty chair at the head of the table and remained standing. Declan stared at her, his mouth hanging slightly open. The room was deathly silent. "Rosalind, what in God's name are you—" he began, his voice a mixture of confusion and fury. Arthur Pembroke cut him off. He rose to his feet and addressed the room. "Gentlemen of the board, for those of you who have not had the pleasure of a formal introduction, allow me to present the majority shareholder and chairwoman of the board of Beaumont Innovations, Ms. Rosalind Beaumont." The words hit Declan with the force of a physical blow. He stumbled back a step, his hand instinctively gripping the edge of the table for support. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly shade of pale. Chairwoman, majority shareholder. It was impossible. A joke. A nightmare. He looked around the room at the faces of the board members. They were all looking at Rosalind with deference. He looked at Arthur, whose face was now set in grim judgment. He looked back at Rosalind. She was looking directly at him, and for the first time he saw her. He saw the intelligence he had mistaken for simplicity, the strength he had mistaken for meekness, the heritage he had been too blind and arrogant to even consider. And in her cold, clear eyes, he saw not a hint of the woman who had once loved him. He saw only his judge, his jury, and his executioner. The coronation was over. The trial was about to begin. The silence in the boardroom was absolute, a crushing weight that seemed to suck the very air from the room. Declan's world had been turned upside down in the span of 10 seconds. His mind raced, desperately trying to find a foothold in the crumbling reality. Rosalind, the quiet art historian, chairwoman. It was a cosmic joke, a cruel, impossible trick. This is absurd, he stammered, his voice cracking. He pointed a shaking finger at Rosalind. She's my wife, or my estranged wife. She's nobody. Arthur, what is this stunt? Rosalind didn't flinch. She let his pathetic denial hang in the air for a moment before she spoke, her voice calm and carrying an authority that resonated off the polished mahogany. Mr. Finch is correct on one point, she said, addressing the board but keeping her eyes locked on Declan. I am his estranged wife, a fact that gives me a uniquely intimate perspective on his character, or rather, his profound lack thereof. She then shifted her gaze to the board members. Gentlemen, please be seated. They sat. Declan remained standing, a statue of disbelief. My father, William Beaumont, founded this company on 2 principles, innovation and integrity, Rosalind continued, her voice gaining strength. He believed you could not have one without the other. For the past 5 years, I have honored his wish to remain anonymous, to ensure his legacy was in the hands of people who shared those values. I see now that my silence was a mistake. It allowed a cancer to grow in our midst, a cancer of ego, deceit, and theft. Declan's face went from pale to flushed with anger. Theft? How dare you? I have given everything to this company. Have you? Rosalind's voice was sharp as a scalpel. She gestured to the screen, where Declan's triumphant final slide was still displayed. Let's talk about your project Chimera. Mr. Pembroke, would you please bring in our next guest? Arthur nodded to the door, which opened to admit the young engineer, Kenji Tanaka. Kenji looked nervous, but resolute. He held a tablet in his hands. Mr. Tanaka, Rosalind said gently, could you please share with the board the project you presented to Mr. Finch 3 months ago? Kenji nodded, and with a few taps, the screen behind Rosalind changed. It now displayed a complex series of algorithms and data flow charts under the project title, Project Prometheus, an internal logistics optimization algorithm. Rosalind walked slowly along the side of the table, her presence commanding the entire room. It seems your conceptual framework for Project Chimera bears a remarkable, indeed, a direct resemblance to Mr. Tanaka's Project Prometheus, an ingenious project you dismissed as unfeasible before rebranding it as your own idea to justify a $120 million acquisition. That isn't just plagiarism, Mr. Finch. It's an attempt to defraud this company. Declan stared at Kenji, then back at the screen, sputtering. That's a lie. He's a disgruntled junior employee. This is a setup. Is it? Rosalind countered, her voice dropping. Is it also a setup that you have consistently erased the names of junior team members from final reports to take sole credit? That your department's stellar quarterly performance was based on numbers you knowingly inflated by pushing service contract billings into the wrong fiscal periods. We have the emails. We have the server logs. We have the sworn statements from your staff who you bullied into silence. We have everything. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Declan was visibly shrinking, the Brioni suit that had seemed like armor now looking like a foolish costume on a man utterly exposed. "You stood in a public forum a week ago," Rosalind said, her voice now laced with a personal cold fury that made Declan flinch. "And you talked about leaving behind dead weight and baggage. You were referring to me. Your pregnant wife." She took a step closer to him, her eyes boring into his. "Let me tell you about dead weight, Declan. Dead weight is an executive who steals the work of his employees. Dead weight is a leader who risks the company's financial health on an ego-driven, fraudulent acquisition. Dead weight is a man so blinded by his own ambition that he fails to see the value in anything or anyone that doesn't directly serve him. You are the dead weight. You are the baggage." She turned back to the board. "Therefore, effective immediately, Mr. Finch's employment with Beaumont Innovations is terminated. For cause. Security will now escort him from the building. He will leave with nothing but the contents of his pockets. His corporate accounts are frozen. His access cards have been deactivated. And his severance is, of course, forfeited." Two stern-faced security guards, who had been waiting discreetly outside, entered the room. They moved to stand on either side of Declan. He looked wildly around the table, seeking an ally, a friendly face, but found only stony expressions of condemnation. His entire future, the VP title, the corner office, the power, the money, had evaporated in less than 10 minutes. His gaze finally fell back on Rosalind, filled with a mixture of hatred and pathetic bewilderment. You planned this. All of it. You built this, Declan," she corrected him calmly. "Every lie, every betrayal, every stolen idea was a brick in the prison you now find yourself in. I just opened the door." As the guards took his arms, his composure finally shattered completely. "You'll pay for this, Rosalind! You can't do this to me!" he yelled, his voice a pathetic echo of its former confidence. "I believe you'll find I can," she replied, without raising her voice. "Goodbye, Declan." He was half dragged, half pushed from the room, his shouts echoing down the marble hallway, before being silenced by the closing of the heavy doors. The boardroom was still. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside. Rosalind turned to face the stunned board. "I apologize for the theatrics. It was a necessary, if unpleasant, piece of housekeeping. Now let's move on to the real future of this company. Mr. Pembroke, please bring up the presentation for the internal development of Project Prometheus, with Mr. Tanaka as project lead and a proposed promotion to Director of Applied Innovation." As Kenji's face lit up with shock and gratitude, Rosalind took her seat at the head of the table. The Queen had not just returned. She had reclaimed her throne, and her reign was just beginning. The downfall of Declan Finch sent shockwaves through every level of Beaumont Innovations. The official company-wide memo, distributed minutes after he was escorted out, was concise and brutal. "Declan Finch is no longer with the company, effective immediately. We wish him the best in his future endeavors." The corporate world's equivalent of a death notice. But the real story spread like wildfire. Whispers in the hallways turned into frantic instant messages, then into detailed accounts shared over coffee. The story of the secret heiress, the public humiliation, and the epic boardroom takedown became an instant company legend. Bianca Slater learned of the news when her own access card was declined at the executive lounge. Her face, still flushed from the celebratory champagne she'd been drinking alone in her office, turned ashen. She tried to call Declan, but his number was already disconnected. Within the hour, a stoic HR representative and a security guard were at her desk, informing her that due to her direct complicity in the fraudulent aspects of Project Chimera and a clear ethics violation, her position was also terminated. Her exit was far less dramatic than Declan's. There was no shouting. There was only the quiet, pathetic sight of her packing her designer handbags and overpriced desk trinkets into a cardboard box, avoiding the scornful glares of the colleagues she had spent months stepping on. She left the building not as a future VP, but as a pariah. In the days that followed, Rosalind worked with a focused intensity that impressed even the most seasoned board members. She wasn't just a figurehead owner. She was a leader. Having studied her father's business her entire life, she had a deep, intuitive understanding of the company's strengths and weaknesses. Her first act as active chairwoman was to promote Kenji Tanaka and fully fund his Project Prometheus, giving him the team and resources he needed. It sent a powerful message throughout the company. Innovation and integrity would be rewarded, not stolen. Morale, which had been flagging under the toxic ambition of people like Declan, soared. Her next meeting was with Genevieve Dubois. "He's fighting it," Genevieve reported, a grim satisfaction in her eyes. "He's hired a notoriously aggressive lawyer, a man named Sterling Ross, and is claiming emotional distress, wrongful termination, and is trying to invalidate the prenup by claiming you fraudulently hid your assets." Rosalind didn't seem fazed. "He can claim whatever he likes. The prenup is ironclad, and the termination was for cause, which we have documented exhaustively. What's his strategy?" "He's going to try and drag this through the mud," Genevieve explained. "He'll leak stories to the press, try to paint you as a vindictive, scorned woman who used her corporate power for personal revenge. He wants to damage the company's reputation to force a settlement." "Let him try," Rosalind said, with a cool confidence that calmed the room. "I'll handle the press." And she did. Instead of hiding, Rosalind agreed to one exclusive, in-depth interview with a respected journalist from the Wall Street Journal. She didn't sling mud. She simply told the truth, framing it as a story of protecting her father's legacy. She spoke of the importance of ethical leadership and creating a corporate culture where talent at all levels is nurtured and respected. She detailed, without naming Declan, the decision to pivot from a costly, high-risk acquisition to investing in their own internal talent. She emerged from the article not as a vengeful wife, but as a savvy, principled new leader in the tech world. The Beaumont Innovation stock, after a brief dip, climbed to an all-time high. Declan's attempt to blackmail her had backfired spectacularly. He and Bianca became a sad footnote. Stripped of their corporate glamour, they were just two grasping, unemployed people. Their high-flying lifestyle vanished overnight. The luxury apartment Bianca had leased in anticipation of Declan's promotion was lost. They were spotted arguing in a cheap diner, their faces etched with bitterness and blame. Declan's lawsuit crumbled under the weight of Genevieve's counterfilings, which included a civil suit against him for damages related to his attempted fraud. Facing financial ruin and public disgrace, he dropped his case in exchange for Rosalind dropping hers. He was left with nothing. Meanwhile, Rosalind was rebuilding. She sold the cold, minimalist penthouse that held so many bad memories and bought a beautiful, warm brownstone in Beacon Hill. She filled it not with designer furniture, but with art she loved, books, and the beginnings of a nursery. She also made changes at the company, implementing new, transparent review processes to protect junior employees' intellectual property. She started a company-funded childcare program and expanded parental leave policies. Changes she knew were not just good for families, but good for business. She was transforming her father's company into her own, honoring his foundation while building a more equitable and modern structure upon it. She worked closely with Arthur Pembroke, who seemed revitalized by her presence. "Your father would be bursting with pride, Rosalind," he told her one afternoon, as they looked over blueprints for a new research and development wing. "You have his vision, but you also have your mother's heart. It's a formidable combination." Rosalind smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. The rage that had fueled her had cooled, replaced by a sense of purpose. She had not just sought revenge, she had sought justice. She had not just reclaimed her company, she had reclaimed herself. She was no longer hiding, no longer an heiress in secret. She was Rosalind Beaumont, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. 6 months later, the Boston autumn was painting the city in hues of gold and crimson. From her office on the 50th floor, her father's old office, which she had redecorated to be bright and open, Rosalind Beaumont looked out at the familiar skyline. The view was the same, but her world was entirely different. The boardroom takedown felt like a lifetime ago. The names Declan Finch and Bianca Slater were all but forgotten. Cautionary tales whispered among new hires. Beaumont Innovations, under Rosalind's direct leadership, was thriving. Project Prometheus had launched successfully, revolutionizing their internal systems and saving the company millions. The new childcare center was bustling, and the culture had shifted from one of cutthroat competition to collaborative innovation. Rosalind's life had been reborn, too. A week prior, she had given birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She named her Willow, a name that symbolized strength and flexibility. Today was her first day back in the office, and she hadn't come alone. In a bassinet beside her large oak desk, Willow slept peacefully, swaddled in a soft cashmere blanket. There was a soft knock on the door. Arthur Pembroke entered, his usual serious expression softened by a wide, grandfatherly smile. "I hope we're not interrupting," he said. Kenji Tanaka followed him in, looking proud and a little shy. "Never," Rosalind said warmly, gesturing for them to come closer. "What's the good news?" "The first phase of the international rollout is complete," Kenji announced, his voice beaming with pride. "Prometheus is officially live in the European markets. The efficiency gains are even better than we projected." "That's wonderful news, Kenji. Truly," Rosalind said sincerely. "Congratulations to you and your entire team. Let's arrange a proper celebration." As they discussed the details, Willow began to stir. Rosalind gently lifted her daughter from the bassinet, cradling her against her shoulder. The tiny infant looked impossibly small against the backdrop of corporate power. Arthur looked at the scene, his eyes misty. "William always said this company was his child," he said softly. "Now look at this. His legacy in the arms of his legacy." The comment touched Rosalind deeply. She looked from her daughter's tiny, perfect face to the portrait of her father that hung on the far wall. He was smiling in the painting, a knowing, confident look in his eyes. For so long, she had been afraid of this world, afraid of the power and responsibility that came with her name. She had hidden from it, and in doing so, had almost allowed it to be corrupted. Now, she felt no fear, only a profound sense of peace and purpose. She had faced the ultimate betrayal, and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, more capable, and more herself than ever before. She had learned that her father's greatest gift wasn't his fortune or his company. It was the strength he had instilled in her, a strength she was only now beginning to fully understand. Declan had called her dead weight, a piece of baggage. He had been spectacularly wrong. She was the anchor, the foundation, and the engine of it all. And this, her daughter, was not a distraction. She was the reason. The future he had so arrogantly tried to claim was here, sleeping soundly in her arms. "We have a lot of work to do, gentlemen," Rosalind said, her voice filled with a quiet, unshakable confidence as she rocked her daughter gently. "Let's get to it." In that moment, she was everything. A mother, a leader, a daughter, a visionary. She was the past and the future of Beaumont Innovations, a legacy not just inherited, but reborn. Rosalind's story is a powerful reminder that the people others underestimate are often the ones with the most strength hiding in plain sight. She turned the deepest betrayal into her defining moment of triumph, not through simple revenge, but by reclaiming her power and building a better future for everyone Declan had wronged. Her journey shows us that true strength isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, but about having the conviction to act when it matters most, and that integrity will always be the most valuable asset. What did you think of Declan's spectacular downfall? Do you believe karma served him right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing what you think. If you were moved by Rosalind's story and believe in the power of justice, please hit that like button. It helps our channel more than you know. And for more incredible stories of payback and empowerment, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.